The Reedy, Set, Grow podcast with Trish Reedy.
Welcome to Reedy, Set, Grow, the podcast that inspires you to grow into the person you're meant to be. I'm your host, Trish Reedy. I'm your local mortgage lender, and I am so excited to bring to you one of my favorite people in our community doing one of the most important things in our community. Our guest today is Tracy Foster with Start. Hi, Tracy.
I'm so excited to be connected, getting to do this conversation today.
Yeah, tell us, what is START? What does it stand for?
START stands for Stand Together and Rethink Technology, and it is a movement to help families know how to develop what we call digital health, which is maximizing the incredible benefits of screens like we're doing right now,
right?
But minimizing some of the side effects. Because as we look at our next generation, there are some important, and even us, our generation, but there's some unfortunate things happening due to the really rapid life transformation that's come with technology.
Yeah. So tell me about the start of START and kind of the path that you and the organization have taken to get to where you are now.
Yeah. Well, I heard a quote recently from a guy named Stephen Mackey that said, "It may be the case that it's harder than ever to be a parent now because it's harder than ever to be a teenager now." And I think really what we've seen is that a lot of life is the same when we're talking about our kids. Kids still don't make the team. They still might struggle in a class. They still might feel nervous around a girl or a boy or whoever. But what's different is the way that those experiences are manifested and affected by technology, where if they do something silly, it's caught on camera and then turned into a meme or shared around the whole school. Or if you make an unfortunate situation, it just gets distributed so much. And what really caused us to start START is the fact that I think almost all parents really desire to be a mentor and a guide for their kids in all areas of life.
Absolutely.
But technology was creating this like black hole. You know, people talk about the digital divide of how lower income kids unfortunately don't have access to technology at the same level as higher income. But we were actually finding a similar type of digital divide, but between parent and child, where it wasn't a financial divide, but it was more of like an experiential and confidence divide. That parents felt like, I don't know enough about technology. My kids are smarter. I feel flustered trying to keep up with all of the different apps, all of these different things. And so then what was happening is most parents were just like, I don't know what to do, shrugging their shoulders and giving up, as opposed to stepping into the ring. And so a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, three of us got together, a former teacher, therapist, and me, who comes from business strategy side. And we just said, hey, we're seeing this. What should we do? And we sparked a conversation that led to thousands of people in the community just saying, hey, I don't know what to do either. And it's because we're the first generation. Yeah. We're the first generation trying to do this. There's no roadmap. We can't like ask our parents, we have no lived experience. So we together become the wisdom makers. And so we actually, Trish, as you probably remember, we didn't intend to start an organization. We went through working so hard to find paths into some of the leading organizations in this general space. We went to Common Sense Media and Center for Humane Technology and said, hey, we love what you guys are doing. We have this amazing group of people in Kansas City who are mobilized and we think we know what they need. Well, you guys come on, we have great barbecue, people. Just come.
We got baseball, we got football, we got barbecue. Come here and help us.
That was before the Chiefs had gotten now it would be like, come on, guys. We got Patrick Mahomes. Who's not coming to Kansas City? Exactly. I would come to Kansas City if I weren't in Kansas City just for the Chiefs. So we went and we said, hey, isn't this great? Because these are organizations that do a lot of research and think tanky type stuff. Don't you want to actually get your hands dirty and work with this mobilized community? And they said, no, that's really important, but we don't know how to do it. And you guys should do it. And we kept being like, we're not available. But if you have
we have
friend,
real jobs,
a guy,
right.
And so then when it just became so clear that there was a need, we decided, hey, this is scary, or we're going to step in the ring. Originally, we agreed, we're going to step in the ring. We're going to do one pilot. I bet it's going to flop, and then we'll be off the hook. We can keep trying to find someone else.
Yep.
But I think really it's just because people yearn for these conversations so much that when we had that pilot, the feedback on it exceeded our expectations, and you should have seen it. Trish was in one of our early ones, but the very first one, our videos were shot by on a phone. They were shaky. And our feedback survey said so many positive things, oh, this is so wonderful. Can we do it more? The one tip is you really need to work on your videos because it's not very good. So that's what launched it. And now it's just kind of taken a spark. And what we do as an organization is provide training, tools, and tips to help equip parents so that they can feel competent and confident stepping into this conversation with their kids.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're right. No one has taught us this. When I was a teenager, none of this existed. It all came into play in college. I remember getting on Facebook right when it opened up at K-State and was one of the first people. And it was really only because I wanted to know who that other person in class was. I thought maybe I'd find them on there. And gosh, it has blown up and has totally changed our world. And I think if it was around when I was in high school or college, oh man, because think about my husband and I. We had a lot of fun back then. There would be some things documented that we would not want our children to see. But nobody was around to show us, not to take pictures of that. Thank God you had to go drop your film off at the 24-hour developing place, and you couldn't just get it back immediately. Man.
Yes. And I think what you're saying, Trish, is such a perfect way for us to step into this, because you put yourself in the situation. And I think this has to be led with empathy. The empathy of essentially crap, what would I have done? Mm-hmm. What would that pressure have been like? What stupid things did I do that thankfully weren't documented?
I can think of so many.
My colleges never saw. What'd you say?
I can think of so many things that I'm so glad there's not proof of.
And what would I have been tempted to do?
Right.
I think about some things that my friends and I would say about different things that happened in assemblies. Oh, that skit was so, lame or something like that, which I'm not proud of as an adult, and also isn't as bad as it could have been.
Right.
But imagine if that was something that I typed. And I think that,
and then it's there forever. It's in the digital cloud forever and ever.
Forever, and it's seen by everyone. There is a difference between, I think about this as a parent. There are things that I process with Jeremy, my husband, about challenges that happened that day. Mm-hmm. And I need a place to be open, right? And not have a political correctness filter on there.
Yeah.
But if my kids were to actually see video of the way that I'm breaking down some of those situations, I think it would be really hurtful. And so that's what's happening for all these teenagers, is they're processing their thoughts, but it's in writing that gets screenshotted, or it's in a video thing or whatever. And so it's just so much harder. And what's interesting is because we don't know what happened, unless we are intentional about stepping into the ring, there's fascinating data that shows that teens don't actually feel good talking to an adult, their parent or other trusted adult, about technology. More than half of kids say, first of all, less than 15% of kids say they've had a good conversation with a trusted adult about an issue they face on technology. Right?
That's no one.
So low.
Yeah.
And it's because there's this lack of cultural translation where, we don't know, we feel scared. 25% of kids say, I'm not even going to talk with my parents about something that happened online, even if I want advice, because I'm afraid they might just take away my phone. Half of them say, I don't think my parents get why I even use it and why it matters to me. And so this is something that
so many kids don't even want to talk to an adult in general. They don't want to be judged. They think they know better. And then when you add on, my parent doesn't understand because they didn't grow up with this, it's got to be hard. It's got to be hard. So you guys created this roadmap that didn't exist before. That could not have been easy.
It was not easy. It still sometimes is not easy. A friend gave me this book called The Messy Middle, and it's talking about entrepreneurship, which I never had envisioned myself being an entrepreneur, but that's absolutely what we're doing. In a total white space where there's no real roadmap that we can bench ourselves off of, and very personally vulnerable and all of that. But this book, The Messy Middle, shows on the path of building an organization. You can probably relate, Trish, as someone who's built a business so effectively.
Right.
But it's like a Richter scale. You have highs and lows and highs and lows and highs and lows and highs and lows. And hopefully that trend line over time
a little bit. Yep.
is going up a little bit.
Yep.
And I actually couldn't finish reading the book because I was so in the trenches of the lows at the time that I'm like, no. You're telling me there are going to be 800 more of these? I'm not sure I can handle it. But the one thing that I really took away before I stopped reading it was the premise of clinging on to the highs more than the lows and just trying to say, hey, and I think that that's been one thing that has gotten us along this way. I mean, it has been hard in so many ways. You know, for the first 18 or 24 months, we were full-time volunteers, you know, because, and full-time plus, I mean, it was absorbing our life. And especially with the speed of some of the national interest that came to it, you know, these different opportunities that took up a ton of time for what was really just a volunteer team. But I think one thing that has helped is throughout the process, there has always been something that keeps us going, you know? So like I said, our very first pilot, we're like, this is going to be so bad. We'll be done. And then actually it went well. And we started to hear stories of people saying, this is the biggest issue. I mean, national surveys show that technology is the #1 battleground in homes. But to hear people say, this is the biggest issue I've faced, and I have not talked with anyone about it ever before. Thank you. You know, let me just tell you, a little bit of encouragement goes a long way. If any of you right now are thinking, you know, send a note to your kid's teacher, send a note to the principal, anyone else like that, because this is just an especially trying time for people in those contexts. And man, I can tell you from personal experience, encouragement and knowing that you're making a difference can give you so much extra energy to keep in the fight.
Yeah. So I think there's probably a little bit of a misconception about START in that some people probably think START is there to tell you, don't use screens, put your screens down, send your kids outside. But that's you're not the screen police,
No.
right?
No, in fact, it drives some people crazy. There's one person who came to a session recently who was like, so you still haven't told me the number of minutes. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to. She's like, no, here are the ages of my kids. How many minutes should it be per kid? And it's like, no, this is not like smoking or drugs where every incremental use is bad. It's more like food. What is it that we're feeding ourselves digitally? And how much of it are we eating for ourselves? But like different people, different things affect them differently. You know, they find that girls, for instance, teen and tween girls are much more likely to struggle with social media, with feeling identity issues, you know, image, all of that kind of stuff. A boy still could, or a boy might be fine. And some girls are fine. So unfortunately, it's very unsatisfying, but absolutely the answer is it depends. And it's about saying for your family, what is it that you value? What is it that you strive for? And how can you use the technology to support that? And where is technology getting in the way? And I will say also on time, it's not just time, but it's quality, right? So if you're using, I mean, we're using screens right now. And so we think about 3 categories. Creating, which would be, I mean, what we're doing is going to cross into 2 categories: creating, connecting, and consuming. Creating would be like this. I think we're creating, we're also connecting. It would be things like when your kids make stop motion videos or, you know, get a recipe on YouTube that they then make. That's super high value use of technology.
Right.
Connecting also, especially when it's something where there's more of a back and forth, not just into
we
the
FaceTime with grandparents all the time. Great use of technology.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's the best. It is so amazing, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then there's consuming. And I want to be clear too, Trish, to your point, even though we're saying consuming is kind of like not as good as those other 2, there's a place for it. I mean, it's not inherently toxic in any way. Let me tell you, I just finished watching the Frozen 2 behind the scenes. Oh my gosh, so good.
Into the unknown.
You know, it's so good. I have to hold myself back even when we're watching Dude Perfect videos. They're one of the biggest YouTubers with our kids. Like, I love it so much. And it is good. It can help me relax. I can learn things from it. So even consuming is not inherently bad, but I think we as adults have an easier self-regulating mechanism to know, and we still fail. But let me just tell you, during election season, or early on in COVID, I mean, I was struggling with just like doom scrolling. And so I could start to feel the effects of I'm on this too long. Okay, I need to step away. But our kids have a harder time identifying that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the really cool things about your family, Tracy, is how you use that consumption and turn it into connection. You know, between your love for Hamilton and Dude Perfect. And tell us a little bit about some of those things that you guys have done to interact with your kids based on the technology that they enjoy.
Yeah, thank you, Trish. I appreciate that. It is something that our family really loves. So we refer to it as this concept of bringing screen time to life. So when you are consuming, or I guess it could count on the other categories, but especially consuming, you know, there's so much. There's a reason why we like it, because it's cool, it's interesting, it's creative, it's novel, whatever. And so we try to think about whatever we're watching, how can we bring that into life? And our kids do it naturally.
Right.
And if you pay attention for those things, you can just kind of encourage that. So for Dude Perfect, my kids do trick shots all over the house. And you know what? We're busy. We're not always going to like step in and try to get the ping pong ball into the Pringles container. We stockpile Pringles containers. I think I've gotten some from your house before, actually. But we will step into the ring. We will honor that and say, hey, Dude Perfect is cool. It's something that our whole family likes. Even if there are some things that are like a little more, I'm trying to think of one that we like less. We put more emphasis on the ones that they like a lot. I'm not a big Star Wars fan, so that's when I'm like, yeah, okay, we can bring Star Wars to life, great, but not. Let's go back to Dude Perfect or Hamilton. But so like with Hamilton, you know, we were quick to help our kids create little costumes from just things that they had around, so that they could be King George and Hamilton, or listen to the music, or get little Lego minifigures that we made look like the characters, so that they can bring those things and act them out. Because a lot of that stuff, the way that kids engage in play, especially younger kids, that's the way that they process.
Right.
And it's really healthy for them. So the more that you can bring it into their real life, it's good for them. And I'll say it's honestly just so fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, being that this is such uncharted territory, there's no one else doing this. I mean, for crying out loud, Diane Sawyer scoured the nation and couldn't find anyone doing what you guys are doing. Tell me a little bit about, well, Diane Sawyer and that whole thing, and then also the mindset that goes into maintaining the energy to help start grow.
Okay, I'll start with the latter, and then Diane Sawyer, we could talk about any angle you want to or how long you want. I think over the past few years on this topic, we've started to see a few more people who in their local community or in a different slice of the pie are either thinking about like digital safety or whatever it is. And I think one of our biggest concepts as an organization for keeping our energy up is trying to constantly scour, like Diane Sawyer did, and find people who are like-minded and join arms.
Yep.
You know, I think there are a lot of situations where nonprofits or businesses in general can try to get competitive and turfy. And one of our biggest values is this is lonely work.
Absolutely.
How can we work together? Like, we do not want to recreate the wheel. We don't have time to recreate the wheel.
Right.
This is like a global need. So I would say organizationally, we use this phrase rooting for rivals, which is we don't want to have frenemies. We want to have friends, and we want to use our distinctive things in collaborative ways. So the more that people pop up, it's like, hey, oh, yay, come
join us. Because a rising tide raises all ships, right?
Exactly. I love that quote. Yes, that's exactly right. So that's been one big thing. Otherwise, personally, I mean, I think just trying to step into what do I feel like is I'm going to quote Frozen, what's my right next step? You know, take the next right step. And say, okay, hey, this feels so big. I mean, it feels so big. Just last night, we hosted this event with people from at least around the country, probably people from other countries as well, talking about some of the negative side effects. And that part is just so heavy. I mean, draining. I just leave it feeling, and people share these stories that are just so sad. And so I think not just dwelling on the problem, but really keeping our eye on the solution and on the hopefulness is another thing that says, hey, we don't need to solve this. I'd love to have it solved, whatever solved means.
Right.
But what's one thing that we can do as an organization or as a family? How can you take one step? That really helps us a lot.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Tell us just a little short snippet about meeting Diane Sawyer and being on this national special, because that's really cool.
Okay. So Diane Sawyer was really interesting. We as a team had been completely burning ourselves out. And we decided we were going to take 4 days off, a weekend and 2 other days. Like, hey, this is our team as a whole is going to take this time off. And during that time, we had one team member kind of monitoring our email. And so during that time, we got an email from the executive producer for Diane Sawyer saying, I'd love to interview. I'd love to come to Kansas City and highlight you guys. And we decided, hey, we made a commitment. I don't care that it's Diane Sawyer. Like, we committed that we're taking this time off. We're not responding to her. And that doesn't really work very well. So, I had heard from the team member on email, she sent me a text saying, hey, I just want to let you know Diane Sawyer reached out to us. What do you want to do? I'm like, nothing. It's like, okay. And then like 2 hours or maybe 6-8 hours later, I get a call from someone from New York. I think it's my brother's office line. And it's her executive producer. And I'm like, so thankfully I kind of wasn't too shocked, but I'm like, oh, hi. And the lady knew that she was cold calling me. So she, to make me feel better, said, oh, I'm so sorry to be calling you. I hope you don't mind. I got your phone number from your mom, which I actually hadn't been weirded out I hadn't really thought, how did you get my phone number? And then all of a sudden I'm like, you got my phone number from my mom? How do you know my mom? And so anyway, so they were like really pursuing. They have different databases to find people. And in that first conversation, she made it very clear that she was really energized by what she was hearing was happening in Kansas City, and that they would love to feature us, and that they knew exactly how, because visuals rule. We're picturing as many people as you can get. Think about a high school gym filled with people with signs about how bad this is and how everything's terrible. And the more colorful, the better. And I said, hey, that's not really what we do. Thank you so much. But, no. And we were such an early organization. We have invested so much with our community to prove that point you said. We're not anti-tech. We are not protesters.
Right.
Okay. So it was like, hey, thanks so much. But, I don't know who else to point you to, but I think you can find some other people. Thanks. And needless to say, she called me back. So a couple days later, so we said no 2 times. We were planning to say no a 3rd time. And then one of the things that she said just really made us be like, okay, maybe we'll do this. And so we brought her in. Then all of a sudden we said yes. And it's like, okay, we need it 2 weeks later. We're going to be there in 2 weeks. So we on a dime flipped and had Trish and Dan among 100 and maybe 115 other people show up for this session. And what was really interesting to us is Start got a momentary, maybe a few minutes of coverage in the thing, which is incredible. But we really reflect on the fact that our role in that documentary was not about us. It was actually about changing the whole narrative. So when Diane came to us, she interviewed us. Plot spoiler, none of our interview makes it in the thing, and you'll hear why. We had spent all this time with our team, 30, 40 hours of conversations over 2 weeks, talking about all of our methodology, all of our philosophy, all of those things. And she walks into the interview and she's like, so are we at war with technology? And it's like, no, actually we're not. We just give a very calm, smiling answer. And she's not very happy about that. And so then she's like, well, are you at least angry? Are you angry at the tech executives? And I said, well, actually a tech executive helped me get here tonight because I used Google Maps on my phone to get here. And I'm grateful for that. So there are a lot of, so anyway, we weren't being sensationalist. And I think that our stance and not backing down on that was not very gratifying for her in the moment and was pretty frustrating. But she then went on, she was going to release it just a few weeks after that. And she then went on to do a bunch of other interviews. And when she ultimately released it, throughout her narrative, as she kind of wrapped it, it was so aligned with Start's messaging.
Yeah, wow. That's really amazing that you guys were featured nationally. That's really big news for Start. I'm really proud of you, Tracy. You've taken such an issue and really brought Kansas City to light and the heart of how Kansas Cityans are. And I love that. I do want to
love that it was about Kansas City. It's so much more than just us. It's our community. Yay.
It is. We've got a great community here, great people. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast, to share all these great people that I know and the cool things they're doing and overcoming and awesome mindsets. So I want to wrap up our episode today with 5 rapid fire questions and see if you can continue to inspire us. First question, what's your favorite quote?
Okay, I'll say 2. The first one that's more related to my work is we compare our insides to other people's outsides. I still remember when someone shared that with me in high school, and it was really profound. And the second one is a Bible verse that just says, to whom much is given, much is expected. I feel just very grateful for the capacity to do this work, and I want to use that capacity well.
That's awesome. Very inspiring for sure. All right, you need to get pumped up. You've had a bad day, you're going to a big event, you're about to have the biggest start class ever. What song do you play to get pumped up?
Well, it's definitely the Hamilton soundtrack, and I feel like almost any song could apply. There are some that definitely could not apply. Say no to this. That one is not on my pump up list. Stay Alive, not on my pump up list. But, oh my gosh, there are so many good Hamilton songs. You could almost hit shuffle.
I love it. I love it. All right, what's the one accomplishment that you're most proud of?
Okay, I think more about things I'm grateful for than reflecting on accomplishments. But if I were to think of an accomplishment, I hope that this gives hope to a lot of parents out there who are listening. But I was a really, 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 really picky eater as a kid. I ate every form of bread, cheese, and tomatoes. So cheese pizza, quesadillas, cheese ravioli. I mean, that was like my whole, and brownies.
Ooh,
that was like my whole
good
palate.
choice. Yeah.
And it has been a lifelong journey there was a few years where my husband was my parents worked so hard at it. My husband really walked through those like college years when it was like, hey, you need to be an adult. You need to be able to go to someone's house for dinner and eat what they serve you. And that is an important life skill. That really struck me. What'd you say?
That is an important life skill. Absolutely.
It is. And so anyway, that was hard. That took growth mindset. That took like, I'm just going to take one step. How can I set interim goals? Mm-hmm. And now I don't think people would have any idea, thankfully, that I used to be like that.
Yeah, I love that. Growth mindset's so important. What are two things on your bucket list that you have yet to check off?
Okay. One is, it's been on my bucket list since I was a little girl to go to every Disney park in the world. So I grew up in LA, spent a lot of time at Disneyland. I've hit Disneyland, Disney World, and Euro Disney. But I have all of Asia still left to do sometime in my life, Lord willing. And then the second one is about to come true. I'm married to someone who is great analytical, math, business mind, but also super creative and doesn't take as much time to pursue his creative habits. And he is releasing a picture book about the Chiefs winning the World Series. So Kansas City's story of epic football glory.
Yes.
Just for fun, just as a learning. And I think it goes back so much to mindset, because you know what? Stepping into the ring of something we know nothing about and just taking a risk feels scary and vulnerable, but we're learning so much. I think we're modeling a lot for our kids. So anyway, I'm super excited about that.
That's amazing. All right, last question. Fill in the blank. I am most inspired by.
Yeah, I think I would say, just for me personally, I'm most inspired by my faith in a couple different ways. And one is, I think there can be so much pressure to perform and to succeed. And it is really grounding to be able to remember, okay, hey, opportunities will come. I want to use them the best that I can. But my identity is not hinged upon. I don't need to be, I'm not desperate. If, like, who knows, if START doesn't work out anymore, it's okay. So I think it just really gives me a lot of hope and helps me to do hard things.
That's great. That's great. Well, Tracy Foster, I am so glad that you stopped to come and visit with us for a few minutes. You can find more information about START at westartnow.org or on their Instagram at we.start.now. Tracy, I'm so thankful to have you as a friend and a neighbor and an inspiration, and to be able to come to you with questions. I'm so glad that you have normalized the fact that we can talk about technology and how to expose our kids to it. It really is helping me grow in my life and in my business, and I'm so thankful for you.
Well, thank you. I echo all of those things back to you. I'm so grateful and honored to be in this first season of the podcast, and really excited about all the other conversations you're having.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today to Reedy, Set, Grow. I'm Trish Reedy, your local mortgage lender, and now it's time for you to go out and grow.
The Reedy, Set, Grow podcast with Trish Reedy.